Hello and welcome to Reframing the Future, the HGKC podcast series, where we talk to business people about their experiences and challenges of building successful businesses. I am Kim Jones, and I am delighted to welcome today as our guest, Sam Tolby from Undebt. Sam is a turnaround specialist. He's also a qualified mediator and an insolvency practitioner. He has dedicated many years to helping businesses at difficult times and to get the best possible outcome, especially when they're at often their very lowest point. Businesses have been through some of the most challenging trading times in the last 2 years, and not all have weathered the storm. So our conversation today is about meeting that challenge and understanding the options that are open to struggling companies. So welcome, Sam.
Hello, Kim. How are you?
I'm great, and it's so good to have you with us today. Well, we've known each other a very long time.
Yes.
And for our listeners, let's just put that in context. So we met at a director's forum at the IOD more years than I care to mention. It's probably more than a decade.
Yes.
And we were both relatively new at the time in terms of our networks and who we knew. And we were finding good folk that we could work with in business and partners to help our clients too. Tell us about your own specific journey. Where did you start?
Potted history, Kim. I qualified as a lawyer, hated it. And I was based in Newcastle and decided that I'd run away to seek fame and fortune in London because I heard that the streets were paved with gold. But they weren't. So I needed a job, and in 1990 I started as a trainee insolvency accountant in central London. I qualified as an insolvency practitioner in 1995 and then decided to become a chartered certified accountant, which I did in 2000. And from 2006, I practiced as a licensed insolvency practitioner. I've been exposed to virtually every type of restructuring insolvency, from a small retail business up to large private companies, both solvent and insolvent. And within those, I've included financial services businesses. I've worked throughout the UK and some foreign countries, if one can treat Malta and Gibraltar as foreign. I've been fortunate to receive really good training from some notable figures in the restructuring insolvency world who sadly are no longer with us, such names as Shirley Jackson of Jackson Norton and Morris, who was famed for dealing with Robert Maxwell. Coalescing in today as me describing myself as a seasoned restructuring and recovery professional. And I've bolted on mediation and alternative debt resolution to those skill sets.
Well,
that's me today.
Because that's a round set of skills and experiences that can really help businesses who are finding themselves a little bit stuck right now, and they may have had really good foundations when they started and now they need some help. So probably a good place to start would be if you could tell us a little bit more about that. What is the best way of talking about going concerns, where they need to be at?
Well, we need to unfortunately do a bit of definition. So something I use to gauge all businesses is the going concern concept. And this provides a standard for business and their owners to assess whether a trading entity is experiencing distress or not. Normally, the going concern refers to accountancy definition, whereby a business prepares financial statements on a going concern basis, with the assumption being that the business will continue its operations for the foreseeable future. It's assumed the business has neither the intention nor need to liquidate or curtail materially the scale of its operations. It is the responsibility of the directors as the executive to provide fair and accurate financial statements to ensure the use of this concept is appropriate. If it isn't, then accounts have to be prepared on a different base. So it's a useful starting point to consider, is a business healthy? I also use the company growth and decline curve, positioning companies where I think they are and strategizing appropriately as to that position.
And that's a really good starting point, because if they know where they really are on that curve, that helps you start to evaluate what their real options might be. So what are those indicators if a firm's in trouble? Where are they on that curve?
The point I'd like to make, especially because my career is based on small to medium SMEs and to the larger private client, exclusively they've got the founding director, manager, owners, but it's individuals and they're doers, not necessarily business analysts. So these concepts are generalized because it gives an indication so they can recognize where they are. So telltale signs, is there a growth and competition that's affecting your business? Has there been a significant decline in demand? Has the business been unable to reinvest in its products and service lines? Because obviously they'll become obsolete at some point and you need to replace and reach out to consumers.
It's a real struggle for some businesses to stay on top of that, as is hiring people right now.
Well, I dealt with in June, July, a business that was dependent on steel. And the prices just were so great, it destroyed their budget. And they couldn't go elsewhere for monies because they were over leveraged through loans, etc. They couldn't put any money in. So we had to find a solution to preserve the best bit of the business going forward, which we were able to do.
That's a great story, isn't it? So from that adversity, they get doing something about it early enough. But there are kind of other signs that you see too, aren't there?
Yeah. Well, employees, loss of key employees to the business, or difficulty in recruiting and retaining suitable employees. At this moment in the groundworks and building trade, there's always a battle between the subcontractor and the company itself. People are being encouraged to become subcontractors in that industry, and people are being snatched up because there's a scarcity of skilled labor. Effectively, it's causing overtrading because the business might have lots of trade, but the inability to resource that work.
Yeah.
There's also sometimes followed on from there is an inability to get financing terms with your bank or financial institution that's giving you monies, especially if you haven't got your own resources or are unwilling to put them in. They're looking potentially at traditional sort of trading distress patterns, etc. And there have been the government loans that have been there and have assisted, but they've been exhausted. And where else do you go for money to take you further towards your getting back to normality?
Yeah, and I think for a lot of businesses, it's just delayed the collapse because it's allowed them to sort of limp along a bit longer than they would have done otherwise.
Yeah, but the finance is a real issue because if you need new plant and equipment, especially if you're a production-based business, you traditionally go and borrow it. But now you're seeing people using overdraft again to finance. Well, it's the inappropriate form of finance for the asset. So there's the concept of matching. You've got to match your asset to your liability, and sometimes it goes terribly wrong. And then if you're constantly going back to the bank, it's short-term finance. So if you go to some kind of other short-term facility, you could be right up against it. And where'd you go for more? You really need to think about it strategically, and you need your professional friend to help you through this situation.
This is kind of part of that why it's so important, isn't it? Why is it important to really understand why your business needs to maintain this going concern? You just can't trade out a difficulty. That's not going to happen.
Yes. Yeah. Well, there's other things that impact delays in making payments to suppliers. If that's not done consensually, they'll put you on pro forma. I always tell people, even if it's simplistic, do a cash flow forecast. And if you're seeing significant decline, you need to analyze and pinpoint why you're going to see that decline. Is it because of your seasonality? In which case you need to either have buffered up your cash or you need to have a facility to ride it out. But if you just leave it to become a roadblock, when you hit it, it'll cause all kinds of problems.
I suppose that's part of the difficulty as well, because you're thinking about the going concern of the status of people in your supply chain, or in your customers, because if they've got difficulties and they're delaying payment, You know,
Exactly.
you should be looking for the telltale signs outside your own business as well as inside your own.
Yeah, most people do customer due diligence. The suggestion you're making, which is a really valid one, you should be doing supplier due diligence as well. Because on the other hand, if your supplier is likely to curtail its activity, it's going to impact on you. One of the things that many people have experienced now is just in time worked when we had a very efficient economy, but when it's not so, and especially in the car industry and electronics industry, lack of chips has brought it to a standstill.
Yeah.
But funnily enough, it's driven up the second-hand car market. It's temporary, we know, but the lag and how many people on those component businesses that are dependent on the main manufacturers, how much resource have they got to see out the issues that are facing the big manufacturers?
We see it in every sector with our clients, from food and drink right through to high value manufacturing and engineering. The entire gambit of SMEs are caught up in this because they don't necessarily have the headroom in terms of cash flow to buy ahead if they can. It's just not available to them. Financing just isn't there.
Other things I would say to look out for is litigation against and for presence of any county court judgments, any winding up petitions that may be pending, because the law changed whereby during the pandemic you couldn't bring a petition against a company. You can now, as long as the debt owed is £10,000 a month, you can petition for the winding up of business. So businesses that owe that kind of level are going to have issues.
Yeah, so, I can see it building already. We're starting to see caseloads rise. Let's talk a little bit about the importance of that. As if I'm a director of a business, what should I really be thinking about?
Well, if the going concern assumptions is no longer there, unless there's special circumstances, you've got finance available or investment coming in, if you lack it, it automatically points to that the company's potentially insolvent. As soon as the owner director realizes this, the company or business is entering what I call the penumbra of insolvency, where the directors are become under a duty of care to not only the owners, which are the shareholders, but the shareholders and its creditors, but where the creditors have priority over its owners. So your actions become open to scrutiny. There's potential personal liability if losses suffered from this recognition point. And if the company becomes insolvent, i.e. unable to meet its liabilities as and when they fall due, that's one cash flow test. And the balance sheet test is the assets are less than its liabilities, including contingent and provisional liabilities. If you know you ain't going to meet them all, suddenly you're potentially insolvent. And the way you value your business alters. So the way in the accounts you hold your assets at their carrying values of what you pay for less depreciation. Here, the assets suddenly are valued at the lower of cost and realizable value. So suddenly you can have a diminution in value, which makes your balance sheet look horrendous.
And it can be really significant, can't it? Because if that is just the cash value of it, what it can be sold for, if at all, then it might be zip. It might be nothing.
And it might impact on covenants with lenders.
Yeah.
This might be due to market conditions that have affected the business, or it might be due to directors' inadequacy, lack of experience. Yeah. But it's important to try and analyse what is the reason why, in order that you can address the issue. There's the option of time, which is a great thing. The more time you have to deal with a solution, the more options you can generate to solve the problem.
Well, that brings me right into my next question, because I often hear this talk about these stages of transparency. So tell us a little bit about who gets involved and the impact of these stages, because obviously the earlier you know something, the longer you've got to work on it, haven't you?
For me, the stages of transparency are the invisibility, translucent, and visible phases. Invisibility, this is where the issues facing the business that are only internally visible within the business itself.
Okay.
So you've got your directors, your higher management, you will see them manifesting themselves. So you will know that cash is tight, or you haven't got the sales, or you've got production costs or costs that are rising that you may not be able to meet, or you've got a revenue debt you're not going to be able to meet that, or etc. With bigger entities, you've got more professional people internalizing, dealing with it. But the one thing I would say is that it's a bit like a ship. When you're a one-man band, you can move more adeptly, but the larger you become, to make significant change, it takes time. So if you are able to make change within the invisible section, no one knows about it. No one knows you've had issues, and you're back on the straight and narrow, but you're not impacted by any laws or whatever, and you're still in control of your business. The translucent phase, issues are beginning to become visible to the outside stakeholder community. So bank directors, internally employees, they will realize something is at odds. Here, you really need to consider a rescue restructuring plan for the business, some kind of position audit to pinpoint what is wrong and what are the solutions.
Now, you see a lot of knee-jerk reactions at this point, don't you? A bit of cost cutting, stop hiring people, stop the marketing costs. That starts to spread that unease amongst your people, maybe sort of partners and suppliers as well, when they see that happen.
A problem with just cutting discretionary spend is people don't realize what discretionary spend is. Just because, say, for advertising, they always say that's discretionary spending, so they'll reduce it, but that might be the reason why you've got your sales. It's important to do cost analysis. I always work off the expression, for every pound I spend, am I making a contribution from that pound? So you look at the costs, you look at the income, and you determine, if needed with help, a recovery restructuring plan to get out of the situation. The final phase, really, where it's total visibility, where everybody knows what is happening to the business, and I mean external creditors. And the part of the problem is you stakeholder third-party interventions become more increasing. You may, depending on your size, have an investigating accountant thrown in to make an outside assessment of your business, and they may not know the background history. They might not gel with the directors, so there's no sort of empathy with what's happening. Or alternatively, you have to bring lawyers in, and it becomes an expensive issue. So the higher up the chain, and on the decline curve, the invisibility phase is probably at the cusp of the company going from growth to decline. The translucent phase is you're at the beginning of the decline, and then total visibility, you are on the decline, and it becomes more difficult the further down you are. Once you reach that visibility, there are real problems, but throughout these stages, you need directors, owners need to overcome this sort of self-paralysis where self-interest comes in, and they become defensive and therefore unable to appreciate and address the problems.
There might not be any other shareholders, it might just be them. And, they take that very proprietorial kind of view of saying, we can manage this, not necessarily actually being the case that they can.
Well, the trick that gets people to 5-10 years, if they're still in charge, when things go wrong, they probably, just through experience, haven't got the skill sets to deal in adversity, because all they've ever known is success.
Yes, because they've been building this thing. And also it's the reputational side.
Yes.
People find it really hard, feeling of failure and the lack of, feeling their self-worth and their credibility is all being challenged at the same time.
Exactly.
When sometimes it's just they're the victim of circumstance. Their business has grown by having one big customer, really. That big customer gets into difficulty or gets bought or sacks them, and then their business is just gone. There isn't enough to maintain their core business, and they get caught out by that. And as you said, they just don't have the experience because they've only been in that business for such a long time. They haven't necessarily invested in their own skills to be able to cope with the change.
Yeah, but you need people with change management skills and specific skills for distress, etc. So which I believe you have change management skills.
Yeah, yes, I do quite a lot of that. But, like every business, no matter how successful they all have dark times too, or harder times. And sometimes the growing pains are as painful. You can't get the finance for the gap that they're in. You can't get the people. They've sold something and they haven't quite got all the people they need yet. So it's the other side of a coin, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that they're addressing. I mean, we've talked a little bit about all these stages. A lot of these firms that we work with, they have quite a lot of minority stakeholders because of how they've grown up. And we have to think about how those get involved, whether they are active shareholders or whether they're partners and collaborators that have some even financial or some product investment in the business. What's your thoughts on those?
Well, stakeholder involvement is very important. What I would recommend is you look at where you are. The director owner probably can't do it themselves. They need to assess who do they need and who can help and influence. And it's always better to have people on side and who feel invested in what you're doing than to leave them out in the cold, suddenly to find out and given a fait accompli. I would suggest people take a quick position audit, assess where they are on the decline curve, and this will dictate which stakeholder will bring in, whether it's HMRC because there's liabilities due, bankers, providers of finance, high important customers and suppliers, because without a business, you're gone. Those other stakeholders that provide finance who will be prepared to give you credit, they've got to know that you're going to be there and work through a plan.
And also there's lots of things happen. Like we've had situations where someone has had a very big client and they've acquired the team from that business. So then they've managed to absorb that. So they end up with lots of partial solutions as well. And that generates some more money. That helps with the actual closing down of the business or the transfer of a part acquisition or a part disposal, depending on those relationships. There's lots of opportunities there in the restructuring. It's not necessarily just because it's in decline, it's going to die. It's maybe that it's a phoenix, it re-emerges in a different format or lives on in through other businesses where it gets acquired.
One of the things is you've got to analyse who is going to be resistant to a plan and deal appropriately, either address it or circumvent it, but you need to consider it, because what you can't do is turn up and say, oh, I didn't think of that, because sure enough, they will have. Kind of. If a business is positioned at the cusp of the decline curve, then it's important to identify who needs to be included in the recovery plan to be implemented. For example, financiers over the last 10 years have got used to the fact that you may have breached covenants, but they would rather you be in trading, producing money than brought to an end. Similarly, HMRC will do time to pay arrangements. You're stretching the credit legally, the use of loans, startup loans, funding. There are certain providers who will give you the money, right? If you get it wrong, they're very severe.
Well, that's a very good point, isn't it? We're talking about the going concern status when people are, hitting difficulties, but it is about that strong foundations.
Yes.
More planning and preparedness kind of upfront of making decisions as much as possible.
I often see the decline phase where you're at this sort of mid-translucent phase. The financial distress, it might also be operational. The way you're doing your business might not be assisting your profitability. The people businesses use to give them the advice, they've got to make sure that they're capable of giving the advice and have got a track record of giving the advice.
Yeah.
So you just got to be careful. Everything costs money, I'm afraid. But at this stage, directors, shareholders probably need assistance.
Yeah, so they are kind of minimising their exposure in that as well, and really understanding the gravity of the situation and what their options are. And as we said, some of the options will see them continue to trade and some won't.
Well, you need buy-in from your stakeholders, and you want to mitigate accusations of wrongdoing and wrongful trading with creditors being treated unfairly. So it's important that you do so. There's a need to draw up a resilient restructuring recovery plan to address the trading. Where businesses are holed beneath the waterline, the going concern's truly gone, and all you're going to see is increasingly losses as it eventually leads to insolvency. At this stage, it's important for businesses to, and it goes back to your earlier point, assess whether the whole or elements can be salvaged, or an income generating bit of the business would be profitable if it was spun off and sold. Luckily, there are certain new kinds of procedures that have been introduced because of COVID, one of which is like a scheme of arrangement where you can, with different classes of creditor, to hold, and a moratorium is put in place to prevent action being taken. And someone like me is called the monitor. And you look at the rescue plan to see if it's viable. But the problem is, as soon as it becomes unviable, the monitor has to say it's unviable, report to court, and suddenly the moratorium's gone and the company's exposed. But it's a useful thing.
And it does give people, that opportunity to resurrect, to regroup, particularly where people's circumstances have been driven by COVID, and which are now obviously, for most people, most industries are beginning to lessen now. They can get back to much more of an operational level. It gives them the opportunity to trade out of that situation and back onto their plan.
Yeah. So there's other insolvency procedures that are there too, which can assist. But when you're at the bottom or towards the end of the decline, I always say to people, insolvency hurts. You never come out of it unscathed.
Yeah, I mean, it's it's one of those challenging things, isn't it? You survive it, but it leaves an impact on you, and it needs that imprint on you for what you do next. So the job of people like me and you is to make sure that we help businesses turn themselves around and continue to trade by passing on our knowledge and skills to them in a way that allows them to be better equipped to deal with the challenges of being in business.
Exactly. Well, if you recall, Henry Ford went bust a few times before he got it right. Walt Disney was bankrupt. If it wasn't for a mouse and a duck, we'd never have heard of him.
Yeah.
So it is possible, and the rescue culture was introduced by the Brown-Blair government.
Yeah.
It's trying to get rid of the stigma of failure, and indeed, through my career, I've experienced moments of failure, and it's how you come back from it.
Yeah, and
sometimes you need help.
Well, do you know what, Sam? I think that is a perfect way to end, isn't it? It is all about the help you get and how you come back and build on foundations then.
Yes.
So I think that's probably a perfect place for us to end our conversation today. I'd like to say a huge thanks to Sam. Him and his team at Undebt are just absolutely brilliant, and they have a wealth of experience and insight, and they're a friendly bunch. And you can just pick up the phone and talk to them, and they will give you some options. They will listen to you and help understand where you are. Their details can be accessed through their website, and I'll just say their website address, but you'll be able to pick it up from the show note too. So it's www.undebt.co.uk. Thank you, Sam. I hope you enjoyed our conversation as much as I did today.
I did. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.